Welcome to Strat's Fireside Chat. This is Paul, also known as Strat-Edgy.
And this is Kale, also known as a rather drunk medic. So,
Alright, so I wanted to talk to you about the games, right? The video games.
The video games we play each day.
Yeah, we had a conversation a couple days ago about it. Remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, I remember exactly what we were talking about. The games that kind of inspired us to want to make games.
Yeah, that's right. And I came out and I told you that, like, Quake was the one for me. Yeah, and you were, like, surprised. You were like, what? Right? You were a little surprised by that, because I don't talk about that game enough, I think, in my videos.
No, I've never heard you talk about it, like, for any length of time.
I wasn't... Okay, so I played a lot of Wolfenstein when that came out, right? Because my friend had a computer that was capable of running it when I was, like... I want to say I was maybe, like, 13, 14? I was pretty young. And we would sit in his house and we'd play it, and it was fucking great. I was like, oh man, I can't wait for a console to come out that can play this type of game, right? And anyway, so Quake was the game that I got back into first-person games for. Right, so previous to that, I played a little bit of Doom, but not a lot. I mostly played games that I could get for free, because I was poor as shit.
Yeah.
The first game I ever got to play, it was in first person on my own computer, was a serial video game. It was the Chex Mix game.
Oh my god, really?
The Chex Mix game, yeah, because I remember you used to like fight like boogers or something in the game, and you were like Captain Chex or something like that, some shit. Whatever the case may be. So it's a first-person game, and I think it was using the build engine, or it was using the Quake or the Doom engine. I can't remember, but it was a first-person game. Had very similar like mechanics as a Doom clone, right? And that was the first game I got to play, and I was like, wow, I really like these games. I just like the perspective of it. And back then, like 35 frames per second was the highest you could get. So it was real choppy. Right? And then I remember I had to get my own computer. I had to buy my own, right? Because I didn't have access to that computer anymore because it was somebody else's.
Yeah.
And, okay, so I said, okay, I'm going to join the army. And when I get back out, I'm going to get my bonus. But I got 4,000 of it because...
You joined.
No, because you have 50% taxes on bonuses. Remember that stuff, kids.
Wow.
50%.
You're only getting half the bonus.
You're only getting half of that. The government is double dipping. They're telling you they're going to give you a $16,000 bonus. They're only giving you 8,000 of it. And they're taking the rest for taxes.
So even when they're trying to reward you, they're still screwing you.
They're still taking their fucking cut. They always take their fucking cut, fucking government. Anyway, so it's fucking, the government's always going to get theirs.
Immediately after saying the FTC is a good thing, fucking government.
But, so, fuck. So anyway, I get out of the military, and I get out and I buy an AMD. Because I was like an AMD fanboy, and I still kind of am. I still kind of like suck AMD's dick way too much. But I went out and got an AMD. It was like a 555 megahertz AMD. And that was like top of the line, baby, at the time when I got it, right?
Yeah.
And I got the fastest RAM I could get and all that stuff. And I ended up getting a video card. Now, the video card wasn't as good as most of the video cards that were coming out at the time. I think it was like... I want to say at one point or another I had a Voodoo 3, which was capable of running most stuff, but it was a terribly shittier card than most of the other cards that were out at the time.
Yeah.
But it was just cheaper. So I ended up playing, I tried to play Blood 2, which was an absolute disaster. That game fucking sucked, and it ran like shit at the time, too. And so I didn't play much of that because I hated it. But then I got my hands on fucking Quake for the first time. My friend lent me Quake, and I played that. And I was so fucking blown away by it that I immediately said, oh, I wonder if I can make my own levels. Because you gotta understand, at the time, they were making levels to be able to run on most people's computers. But the first thought that popped into my head was, what if I just made a big open world? Right?
Right.
And it did not run well. It ran at like less than a frame a second. I don't even know what you could call the frame rate that it ran at, but it was noticeably shit, right? So I started like scaling the levels down to see like what's a good size level, how big I can make them, how open, how many monsters I could put in things, and I was just fascinated by it. And it was only until recently when I got back into it, like maybe 8 years ago, when I realized like, oh my god, like I know so much more about this stuff now. Like, I wonder what I could do, and the technology's so fucking good now. You can make all of your dreams come true. Like, all of the things you ever wanted to do. Like, I so want to make a continent in Skyrim. Like, I can't tell you how badly I want to do that. You know? But back then, Quake was the thing that came out that had level editors for it. People were making BSP compilers for it, lighting compilers, engines that would basically compile your map file into something playable in Quake. So when that came out, you could start making your own levels, and I was so just taken in by it that I discovered things like the monsters, if they're not facing you and you're not in light, they won't attack you. So I started figuring out that you could make like stealth levels in Quake. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. This is so amazing. Because like it was right around the time too that I think that Thief came out when I played it for the first time, and I was like, man, I want to make my own Thief game. And I was playing around in Quake 2's engine and discovered, oh, you could like make a fucking stealth game out of this. And I made my first stealth map. And I think I was maybe like 17 or 18, right? And I just think back to that stuff and I think like, wow, what a fucking impact Quake had. And then you go back and you play it now and it seems so simple, right? It's such a simple game. You run around, you jump, and you shoot. But it's so much deeper than that because of all of the coding mistakes that they made, essentially. Like, hitting the left and up arrow key will make you accelerate faster because every tick the left button is hit, it's adding velocity to the movement, right?
Right.
But it always sets it to 0 on the next tick. But then you hit up as well, and now it's taking and adding that movement to it. Now you're doing twice the amount of movement per tick that you would be doing if you were just holding one key. Right? But that turned into strafe hopping, strafe jumping, shit like that. That led to running down hallways slightly turned to the side so you could gain momentum, and then turning forward to jump a really high platform. Right? That's what it turned into. Coding mistakes turned into a whole art form in that game.
Turned into mechanics.
And then rocket jumping and shit came from Quake 1 as well. So there was a lot of like, there's a lot of things that people loved about those fucking games, including the movement that got turned into movement in other games like TF2.
I was going to talk about that, you know.
Yeah, like Valve only exists, and if I'm wrong on this, please somebody correct me who's a game historian, but I remember this. They only exist because they took a version of Quake and made the source engine out of it, the original source engine. Now, listen, they could never be sued for this because id was awesome. They released all of their code open source.
Oh,
yes. All hail John Carmack.
Thank you.
Hail him. Because if not for him, I don't think we would have half of the games that we have now, or had in the past.
Absolutely insane. Thank you again, John Carmack.
I'm just saying, the dude released the shit open source. So, they created Source Engine, and then Source Engine became Half-Life 1. I cannot express to you how amazing the opening moments of Half-Life is. I can't express it to you. Because the impact that that game had on me and everybody who played first-person games was so immense. The stuff that they were doing was only possible previously in 2D engines, right? Where movement was very easy to track and scripted events and all that stuff could actually happen. Up to that point, like, engines didn't even have bones for animation. If you know anything about animation, skeletons are like one of the most important things that animator has in their toolbox.
Yeah.
When you have to move everything by vertex, it looks like shit. And that's why Quake 1 kind of looks like shit by today's standards, right?
Right.
Because it didn't have that kind of stuff. And the way it rendered things tended to give it a wavy look, right? All of this shit was so new at that time, right? When Quake came out. Go back to Valve. Valve starts developing Half-Life. Half-Life comes out, and previous to this, all the FPS games were about was like hitting a button to open a door, or finding a key to open a door. That's it.
Shooty, shooty, bang, bang, move, progress.
Shooty, bang, bang, move, progress. That's it, right? Half-Life came out and was like, no, fuck all that. We're going to do a whole story in a first-person game with the scenes being acted out like it's a movie. As close as we could get it to look like a fucking movie.
You know those stories you guys are yammering on about in JRPGs? Yeah, we're going to do it with first-person shooter.
Yeah.
And you're going to fucking love it.
Going down a tram line, and I can remember I'm watching people move boxes around and do stuff, and then I see this big, huge mechanical thing lifting up boxes and taking it across the map with fully articulated mechanical legs on it was a biped, I think, and that had like spider-like limbs that would articulate like a spider. Bro.
Dude.
That shit blew me and the collective fucking minds of every kid that had a computer at that time. We had never seen any fucking thing like that ever, period, ever. And even after that, it was hard for RPG or FPSs to catch up. They just weren't able to catch up to the light years ahead of everything else that Half-Life 2 was, or Half-Life 1 was. Now, let's talk about Half-Life fucking 2, okay? Because the main problem with games like, I think it was Gangster or Mobster, and games like that where they tried to do RPG-like stuff in the Quake engine, Unreal 1 had come out, blown us away with its like colored lighting because we didn't have anything like that. We just had one color flavor of lighting.
Yeah.
Right?
Round.
And then Unreal came out and it's like, hey, no, white. Just white light everywhere. Right? And then Unreal came out, color lights, RGB, man, whatever kind of color fucking light you want. That game also had scripting. And it had some pretty cool looking shit in it, right? Half-Life 2 came out after it, I think. And it took what Unreal did and blew it up to like 11. Everything looked like that. Right? There was constantly shit happening. Shit was constantly blowing up around you. The level was changing dynamically as these things happened. People were just like, dude, this is fucking insane. And it was telling a kind of like really weird sci-fi-ish kind of story with a silent protagonist. And there was just so much about it that was new and unique that we had never seen before, right? It's by no means unique now when you play it because it's been done to fucking death now.
People do it all the time. They copy something that works. It kind of ruins it.
But understand, I don't remember a game coming out after Half-Life 2 until the point of Half-Life 1 up until the point of Half-Life 2 that was as good as Half-Life 2 was.
Oof.
Right? So, like, the problem previous to this was that animations were super stiff. The poly counts on models were so small that the lips would move like Muppets, you know?
Sock puppets.
Yeah, just like big flat insides of their mouths clapping together. Yeah. So animations look like shit. No facial expressions, because why would you even bother trying to have facial expressions on models this low detailed? And then a couple of games came out, like Undying and stuff like that came out, where they tried to do a little bit more, but they failed to do a little bit more. And then fucking Half-Life 2 comes out, and they're like, yeah, so we took the polygon counts way the fuck up. We created a facial animation skeleton so that you can actually see the emotions on people's faces as they talk to you. And it almost looks like it was motion captured, but it wasn't. As far as I know, I don't think it was motion captured. It was all hand animated that way. And it looked fucking fantastic. It looked every bit of fucking amazing. And then also the fucking graphics and everything else. The graphical quality was so high and so good, man. And that shit just blew me away. I tried for months to figure out how to do what they did in that engine. I could never figure it out because the tools weren't good enough. Like, Hammer wasn't as good as it is now. But man, that shit was so good. And you had talked about a game that you really loved too.
So, a game I really loved, even like way back then, was TF2. For those who don't know the history, I've maybe sunk a couple thousand hours into that game. Not hundreds, thousands. That was kind of like Half-Life 2 for my dad, but it wasn't in terms of animation. Yes, animation for it was great. There was so much colorful and vibrant and fun, but what I never got was a really good FPS. Now, I didn't have a computer. I had a friend who I had to like play games with. Wasn't the greatest friend, but he still showed me this. And the first game he ever showed me was fucking TF2. The movement, the way you could move, the different ways you could go about solving things, the different crazy builds, just how fast-paced and insane it was, yet functional. It made sense. Rocket jumping made sense. Sticky jumping made sense. Bouncing in Uber over rockets to get closer to your enemies to beat them to death with a fucking shovel made sense in that game, and that was the first time I ever experienced it. And then I find the modded levels. Holy shit. If Valve didn't give the community so much leeway with this game, it probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. But because there are so many different game modes, prop hunt, Saxton Hail mode, in which you're just a giant dude beating the shit out of everybody else and they're trying to kill you and you pretty much seem invincible. Death Run, all these different game modes that you could go to after you were done with the main game and the constant free updates. What got me into wanting to make games was TF2's modded levels.
Yeah.
It was all the little differences in them, because once I stopped playing TF2 and I finally had a computer, which TF2 was the reason I got one, was I played games like Darkest Dungeon and Nuclear Throne. Now, these games are really fucking hard. These games will kick your ass. Nuclear Throne especially. It is the twitchiest shooter you could ever have. But Darkest Dungeon was, in my opinion, a little more on the unfair side of things. Relied too much on RNG. Tried to be Dark Souls, but with random dice. Doesn't work. Not the greatest. And every time I played them, I thought, how could this be improved? What can we change about this? And TF2 gave me that perspective, because if you didn't like something in TF2, it was real easy to change. It was real easy to find somebody else who already made that change. Didn't like how a weapon was statted? Boom! Go to this server. New weapons. New weapons made. New designs. New items. New stats for them. This was such a revolutionary concept to me. And the company itself didn't have to do this. They relied entirely on the community for this, while they made new and better content. And as I'm playing games like Darkest Dungeon, I want to do the same thing.
Did you ever try to like make anything in
TF2?
TF2?
I did, but my laptop just didn't run good enough for it. It barely ran TF2.
Yeah, I think that's like part of the problem now, is that this stuff is so inaccessible now, in a way, because it's so complicated and because the tools that come out for it aren't robust enough. Like, to me, it seems like a better idea to release one Call of Duty every 3 years But have that Call of Duty sustain itself over the span of 3 years, than having 3 different companies all affecting one game's reputation by the success or failures of 3 other studios making the same game every year.
Yep.
It doesn't make much sense to me. I guess that there's more money involved in it and you can make more, I guess. But it seems more intelligent to me that you work on one game for several years, releasing content for it, and letting the audience also release content for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That they can use in the single-player game or whatever the case may be. Like, the games that were the most successful for me, that I loved and played the hell out of, were like Star Wars Galaxies, where you could make your own town with your guild, have your own house in that town, positioned in a certain place in that town, right? And have vendors set up in there, or have it decorated whatever way you wanted to decorate it. You know, that stuff was like super important to me because it was something that I was working towards, right? Because that is the most raw simulation of what it is like to live that you can get. I find a home. Wait, first I find a job. Then I do a thing and I make money. And then I buy a house. And then I live in that house. And then I eventually make it my home. Right? But all the while, I'm a fucking bounty hunter hunting down rogue Jedi for the fucking Empire. Yeah. Right? And now you've got a simulation RPG, right?
Right.
And it was done right. It was right. But what killed it was people wanting fucking Jedi. The Jedi literally killed that game for thousands of players. It killed it. The moment that happened, it was like everybody just wanted to be Jedi now.
And I mean, it kind of makes sense for everybody to want to be Jedi, but the issue is...
it brought the community down. It destroyed the actual community around the game because all of the good players were going off to go do this other fucking thing. While meanwhile, the people who were holding the town together were no longer interested in the town. They're only interested in getting fucking holocrons to figure out what their next fucking class needs to be so they can grind that out. It became a game. In other words.
It became your old modern game.
Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to know what like got you into it because I have this theory that I want to talk about in the next video.
Okay.
Which is that the lower quality of games, like the lower quality of creativity and the lower quality of the actual stories, but like also the overall lack of improvement from generation to generation is one of those things I want to talk about. And I think that that is directly attributable to the lack of tool sets for games to make levels.
Yeah.
And for kids who are interested in it to actually get into it.